the latest edition of Deals and Deadlines. That's Hadley. I'm Matt. We're here to talk about all things sports business, all the big stories, including Netflix with the big Jake Paul-Mike Tyson fight. We will get into that discussion. There was a firing in the NFL that the timing is a little bit interesting, so we'll talk about that. We'll have one of the preeminent sports lawyers when it comes to all things NIL joining us coming up in a little while. All right, Hadley, let's start right here, though, because as we record this morning, the Juan Soto chase is in full effect, and I look at you. I could see you. Your eyes are tingling. You're lighting up because the agent who gets the fees. I would be
lighting up if I was his agent.
Right, yeah. So Juan Soto, here's the latest. Juan Soto had his meeting with the Yankees. Yankees said everything went well. In one part of the meeting, what was at least reported is that Juan asked for specific upgrades that would be made on the roster, and Hal Steinbrenner, who's running the Yankees, said, yes, we will make those upgrades. The Yankees also said they can be competitive with whatever Mets owner Steve Cohen is willing to pay. So the numbers that have been leaked, 12 or 13 years, $660 million. I've seen some reports. Yeah, I've seen some reports 14 or 15 million for 700 million, or 14 or 15 years for 700 million. So let's start with the money. Where do those figures come from other than Juan Soto's side?
First of all, I think those numbers are going to be accurate. I think they're not trying to balloon the numbers in the media to get a better deal. He's going to get what he wants to get. So I think that number is going to be in that 600 to 700 million. Who's leaked it? I have no idea. But again, most leaked numbers are for negotiation purposes. I don't see that happening here. I think he's going to get what he wants to get. Listen, we know the suitors, Yankees, Mets, Dodgers, maybe the Red Sox. So he's going to get what he's asking for. The interesting thing, and I read the same thing about the Yankees, that he's looking for, upgrades. Well, it's hard to give all these upgrades when you're asking for $700 million. Right. And so I always refer back to Tom Brady as an example. Tom Brady could have always asked for top dollar, and he chose not to. Again, different salary cap, but he understood the dynamics, financially at least, that I'm making so much money. For me to go ahead and have a complete team, I need to make some adjustments. I don't think Juan Soto's thinking that way. I think he's thinking, hey, I want the best team around me. But at the end of the day, he's going to do what's right for him, and he's not going to do it at a discount, I don't believe.
Do you think this could have any resemblance to the Shohei Ohtani deal where some of it gets deferred to help the team in some way to be able to spend more now to stay below what is one of the thresholds of the competitive balance tax and to guarantee he's going to have all that money waiting on him anyway later on? Is that even a possibility?
Yeah, I think all these things are on the table, obviously. The difference between Juan Soto and Ohtani is 25 versus 30. Right. I mean, you're talking about a big difference. Granted, Ohtani's a two-way player, but I think Juan Soto is reaching these numbers much earlier than most players get to reach these numbers. And I think he's going to be in a position where he's going to dictate these things. I'd be very careful, though, and I always say this to all of our clients even. You want to make sure you're in an environment that you can be at long term. And so whether you're making $600 million or $700 million, you want to make sure that the team around you is going to help you win. And at the end of the day, he wants to win championships too. He's going to have the money. So again, whether it's one of the New York teams, LA, whoever it may be, I think it's smart that he looks at big picture and what the team is going to do besides him to help that team grow and be competitive.
I will give you a sports opinion on this. I think there's something different about signing Juan Soto if you're the Mets, and I'll use the Mets as an example, that's different about Shohei to the Dodgers. Again, the way it was structured works out beautifully for the Dodgers, and then later it'll be great for Shohei, but from a team-building concept, in this case, Juan Soto, who's not a two-way player, is going to make $45, $46 million a year. It is hard to put together a 26-man roster, even without a salary cap in baseball, because everybody's got a budget. And even Steve Cohen, the billionaire owner 2 years ago, was like, I can't spend this every year. So what do you do? Because the Braves' philosophy is one we like, where it's like they have a sort of a cap internally. They don't admit this, $22 million for this guy, $22 for that guy, that when they have huge cluster injuries like they had this past year, they can sort of survive it and get to the postseason. When you're built at the top with star-level players like Soto, the bottom of the roster just can't be filled with a lot of quality talent because you're just not going to spend on it.
I agree. And listen, the Braves are a perfect example. With the Braves in the perfect world a few years ago want to re-sign Dansby Swanson, I would think the answer would be yes. However, you can't pay everybody. And I think you're exactly right. When you have the upper echelon that are so rich, it makes the bottom that much weaker. And so I think it's that fine balance, and I think it's important. Listen, we had Alex Anthopoulos on the show, and he talked about that when he's negotiating, he always has to remember he's spending somebody else's money. I think the Mets of all teams, and in the Yankees for that matter, these owners really want to win. It is New York. And so they're willing to do whatever it takes. And sometimes it's to their detriment.
Right.
We see it in the NFL. We sometimes see it with Jerry Jones, when he's spending money in certain areas, and now he doesn't have the depth to go ahead and win on a regular basis. So health comes into play, and I think you got to be smart about your money and never overspend, because if you overspend at the top and you can't have the depth, then you can't win games when it comes down to it.
All right, let's talk about another story in New York. The Jets this week fired Joe Douglas, their GM. So you've represented front office folks before. Tell me about the timing, because I understand with a coach, but with a GM, why now?
Yeah, first of all, love Joe Douglas. He's one of the better guys in the business, not just from a personnel, but from a personality. Great character, unbelievable human being. I think timing is terrible, right? Things are not going to change as the season finishes. There's been a lot of issues going on with coach, with general manager now. There's been reports about the owners dipping their feet in areas they should not do.
Which I do want to ask you about in a moment, because, well, actually, let's do that. Because you, again, have dealt with front offices and negotiating with GMs, and I'm sure you hear the whispers of, let me get to the owner, let me see what everybody thinks. There was a story in The Athletic by Diana Rossini that talked about all the ways that Woody Johnson, the owner of the Jets, has been the picture of the meddling owner. He fired Robert Saleh without consulting anyone. I mean, it's his team, but it still seems odd. He blocked a player's extension, Bryce Huff. He denied a trade that would involve Alan Lazard and a day 2 draft pick for Jerry Jeudy. He refused to negotiate with Hassan Reddick and his team on their extension demands. He pushed for the Devontae Adams trade along with Tyron Smith and Mike Williams signings. He called for the benching of a player against the staff wishes. And at one point, he suggested to the staff they should bench Aaron Rodgers. And the staff thought he was kidding. Like, again, it's his team, but Hadley, this seems very odd for the owner to be this involved.
This is allegedly, right? Because these are a lot of finger pointing now and who said what. Right. So we don't really know what Woody Johnson did or didn't do. I've worked with Woody. I've had players with the Jets, and I've had no problems with them. So again, this is where a general manager has to take ownership, right? Because, this is his team to run on the football side. And so all these different things, if they're true, and Woody Johnson was that involved and said no to a lot of these things, then shame on Woody Johnson. My gut tells me it's kind of somewhere in between, where he's had some input. Joe Douglas had some input. When Robert Saleh was there, he had some input. But I think that at the end of the day, owners have to be smart about what they're doing. When they hire general managers, yes, it's their paycheck, it's their pocketbook, but at the same time, you've got to let them do what it takes to run a team, make decisions. And, Hassan Reddick, for example, he reneged on a deal that they thought they had. Whether they did or didn't, who knows what happened. Benching Aaron Rodgers, you're not benching Aaron Rodgers. I mean, let's be real. You paid him all this money to be the face of your franchise. You've got to run with it. There are some stories out there that he may be playing injured.
Right.
So that's why he's not at the level he needs to be at. So there are a lot of moving parts. They've had injuries on their own. They had one of their star defensive ends and Jermaine Johnson get hurt. So, I mean, this team has a lot of holes. And unfortunately, when that happens and you don't win, and listen, Joe Douglas has played out his contract. I mean, he's in his 5th or 6th year. He's in the last year of his general managership. So, it was going to probably come to an end anyway.
But I would add this, and again, this is the football part of it. It seems like a pretty talented roster, which he put together. And I know it's the pound of flesh and it's New York and you're going to fire guys because the team isn't winning. It just seems odd that this team hasn't played up to the talent. And the GM gets it. All right, let me ask you.
You got to win. At the end of the day, no matter what it is, collegiately, high school, NFL,
or everybody goes.
At the end of the day, you've got to win ball games. And if you're not going to win ball games, the buck's got to stop somewhere. And I think that this owner is like, I'm ready to move on and clean house as far as administratively and coaching wise. Take my talent, because I think they're thinking like you. We've got talent. Yeah. We've got to win and be competitive, and we're not. I'm the owner. I get to decide what's going on, and I think that's what Woody Johnson is doing. All
right, let me ask you about one more story, and this is, again, for something like, contract stuff that you negotiated. I find this interesting. Florida Atlantic fired Tom Herman. Remember the former Texas coach? He was a rising star 5 minutes ago. Now FAU has fired Tom Herman, but part of the story was there was a buyout, like any coach has, but there was a clause in his contract that would allow FAU to reassign Tom Herman to another position that he would be qualified for the duration of his contract, so he would get paid out the full amount. I mean, it seems odd to me, or is that something?
It's not odd.
Okay.
Not. It happens more times than not when you negotiate contracts. And I know all about Tom Herman because, unfortunately, I work with Charlie Strong, who was the head coach at Texas, got fired, and Tom Herman came to replace Charlie. So, but we've had stuff in contracts, both from a head coach to a coordinator to an assistant coach at the collegiate level, where there's language in there that if they fire them, they can demote them, remove them from that, and put them in a different capacity. Now, nothing really happens that way. I mean, it may happen for the remainder of the year if that happens, but at the end of the year, that coach goes on. And also, a lot of coaches have offset language, meaning that if they go find another job in football and are paid, whether it's at the professional ranks or college ranks, the team that owes him the money gets that number offset from that bottom line. So, coaches do that. The NFL does that. So it's something that protects the team. You just don't want to fire somebody from coaching and not have a place to put them. So that is a normal thing, believe it or not. And, it's odd. But you know what? When you're representing these coaches, you really just want to make sure they're getting paid. And if it means that they've got to do something else administratively for a month or whatever it is during the season, so be it.
Okay, so the side of the story is, according to Adam Schefter, Ray Lewis has emerged as a candidate to become the next head coach at FAU.
I have not talked to. I know Ray very well, and I'm on a project with Ray on something else, so I have not talked to Ray directly about it.
Might be somebody to get on the show here that would make some sense.
100% will plan on doing it, and it's something that it'll be very interesting to see if Ray really wants to do that, because what people don't listen. Would Ray love to coach? A lot of these guys would love to coach. I think Ray would too, and Ray lives in Boca, so that's his home. It is a full-time gig. And Ray is involved in a lot of other projects, a lot of charity stuff. He's still involved with the Ravens. There's a lot of things he's involved in. This would take away from that. So I'm not sure he wants to follow in Dion's footstep.
Right.
But, if it's something Ray could do it.
I always think the idea of the job sounds better than actually doing 100%. The job.
Yeah. But Ray, of all people, with his personality, his ability to bring other players around, I think Ray would do an amazing job. But again, I don't know if it's something that's worth his time versus how much they're going to pay him. And if he wants to become a coach, big picture wise. Yeah.
All right. Later on, we'll get into what happened with the Netflix good and bad of the Jake Paul-Mike Tyson fight. There are a lot of things in the sports TV industry that we'll discuss coming up. But coming up next, Darren Heitner will join us. He's kind of the preeminent sports lawyer when it comes to the ins and outs of NIL and the way it's changed college athletics. We'll pick his brain about that and more next. All right, we continue with Deals and Deadlines. Hadley and Matt back with you. Let's welcome in right now the preeminent NIL aficionado. He is Darren Heitner of Heitner Legal, sports lawyer, who I think can give us some insight on the ever-changing landscape of college athletics. Darren, we appreciate the time. How are you?
You guys are far too kind. I'm doing well. Thanks for asking.
And before we start, asking him all these questions, let me kind of give Darren his true props. I can tell you, someone who's been doing this for 30-plus years, anytime I have questions, legal questions, or things that my clients want to do, whatever it may be, sports related, that's what even though I'm a lawyer, but it's above and beyond my pay grade, Darren is the first guy I reach out to, I recommend, and he always shoots everybody straight, and he does a great job, Darren. So I'm glad we've known each other for a long time, and you've taken care of myself and my clients, and glad to have you on this show.
You've been very gracious to me throughout the years. I remember being in law school and reaching out to you, so thank you as well.
So, Darren, I guess let's start with a broad question. We'll kind of drill down as we move along. This has all happened so fast, and I still think people are trying to get a handle on everything because the way NIL was sold feels like it's changed to now just a recruiting tool for teams, for coaches, for schools. So let's start right there. Has NIL progressed the way that people thought it was going to progress when it was introduced?
It's a wonderful question, and it's weird to think about it from the perspective that it's all happened so fast, because here we are actually 3+ years after the NCAA decided we're going to peel back our blanket prohibitions that had prevented athletes, no matter what sport, revenue, non-revenue, from making money off of their fame. And even though we're 3+ years in, there's still so many questions. But to your specific question as to whether it's evolved into what people thought it would evolve into, I guess it depends on who you ask. I thought that it could go in this direction. It was certainly not the intention of individuals who were behind the push, myself included. I mean, going back to 2019, I remember being involved with local politicians who ultimately decided to sponsor legislation in the state of Florida that essentially said, heck with the NCAA's prohibitions, we're going to allow name, image, and likeness transactions in the state of Florida. We were the first state to have a July 1, 2021 effective date. That's a very important date because across the nation, that's when the rights changed for athletes to be able to enjoy these sorts of protections and make money. And when those stakeholders, the politicians, ultimately the athletic directors, the coaches, everyone started getting behind it, it wasn't because there was this intention to now basically push athletes toward being employees for all intents and purposes. That's the look and feel of it, even though we don't describe them as such. It was really inherently to allow them to be like professional athletes who can enter into endorsement deals off the field, off the court, do autograph signings, do appearances, etc., or lend their name, image, and likeness to brands for use on product packaging or in their commercials. But it certainly has evolved into something much, much larger than that. And a lot of the players who are receiving money, it has really nothing to do with the work that they're doing to promote on social media, and more so to commit, enroll at, and stay at certain schools to benefit their programs.
Yeah, I was going to add to that, Darren. The person I kind of use when I think they thought about NIL was someone like a Tim Tebow, right? Where the University of Florida was really benefiting from Tim's name, image, and likeness, and you needed to create a platform where players like that can do it. Do you find, though, that in today's framework, that most of the NIL monies is really pay for play? It's really recruiting purposes. It's not really the branding that the original intent was for.
A lot of it is. I mean, right now, without disclosing any names, I'm working on a few players who are 5 stars for the 2025 class in football. And, we're talking to different schools. And we're not even sometimes even talking directly to the collectives or the boosters. We're talking to head coaches and position coaches about the value. So inherently, we've gone far beyond what the real market value is, which is subjective by nature, of what value they're providing in these social media posts, appearances, et cetera, to really the value that's perceived on what they'll bring to the school, and not only for themselves, but what kind of class can they build around them? Because there's huge influence based on a 5-star, let's say, quarterback deciding to commit and enroll at a school. A lot of other players, like wide receivers, want to play with that very prominent player. So, when we're talking about the really talented blue chip players, a lot of the money, at least preliminarily, is related to what value they're going to bring toward the program itself. Now, some of those athletes have amassed very impressive social media followings, are incredibly engaging, may look the part, et cetera, and they'll get the big Fortune 500 company deals or even the smaller local regional deals. But how many offensive linemen, defensive linemen, these players who are putting on helmets all the time are really all that marketable. Mm-hmm. Few and far between, right? So, look, we do deals for very marketable athletes. The Cavender twins I've worked with for 3.5 years. We just signed a massive deal with Ghost Nutrition, which is, a nutritional supplement brand. We've been doing deals left and right throughout the years, but I'd say that's the exception to the norm.
So let's follow up on that, Darren. Then it's been 3.5 years, so it's still a small but decent sample. If it's a small mom and pop shop, listen, I'm going to give the players some money. I want them to come to my school. It's just for the good of my program. For bigger companies, have they seen some ROI that shows them these are good investments?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. And I'm not an expert on return on investment. And I think in the world of social media, it's a bit more difficult than, many years past when you could really look at the data and analyze it and better determine what the return is. I mean, in very few circumstances, unless an athlete is using a link where a consumer is clicking it and you're able to track whether a purchase results from that click, can you really tell with certainty what the return is? And even in those situations, oftentimes consumers will click the link and not purchase on that occasion, but purchase some later time. And, you know, as agents, lawyers who represent the athletes, we don't love those types of deals. The click conversion type deal. We would rather.
When you can track it, that's scary, right?
Right. I mean, we want the guaranteed dollars. We want we'll take some royalties if they're going to create a brand around the athlete and maybe equity, depending on how much we really appreciate and respect the company. But from what we hear from brands when we deliver the social media metrics, we find that they do receive quite often, from their perception, a nice return on the investment. Again, using the Cavender Twins as an example, we've had brands come back to us many times over to renew and to extend the relationship and to really embed themselves with those girls. And so, I can't tell you that it's true on every occasion, but we've heard from brands left and right who say the cost isn't so high yet for a lot of the players, and they see significant returns on their investments.
Darren, let me ask you. I'm going to ask you two questions. The first one is, take the Cavender Twins out of this. Obviously, they're the exception, not the rule. But let's talk about football, since that's the big money sport. What would you say the percentage of NIL monies the players are receiving are coming from the collective versus third-party marketing deals? And then secondly, what do you think it's going to take today and tomorrow, budget-wise, for these Power 4 conference teams with their collective monies to compete with the other universities?
So, and I think any agent or lawyer who's been around the professional space for a long time would agree. People think on the outside that, because these players may make millions of dollars on the field, on the court, that there's inherent marketability. But as many in the profession know, a very, very select few are truly marketable. Sure, some players can get these really small local regional deals, but less than 1% of the entirety of the profession are really exploiting for massive dollars. I mean, you think of, let's use Colorado's football team as an example. Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter, super marketable on a national level. And by the way, a big reason for that is not only the success of the school since they've been there, but Deion Sanders. But then you consider Boise State, right? Maybe they make the CFP, right? They're a really good team. I know there's a running back. I can't even mention him by name. Doubt he even has any massive marketing deals. And when you go beyond him, who is in the Heisman contention, I can't name a single player, and I doubt a single one of them has any sort of national deals. So, very few players, are actually making significant dollars. A lot of it is funneling through the boosters and the collectives, and they're really getting paid in exchange for their performance on the field, on the court, as opposed to real value that they're providing through social media or otherwise.
Darren, last thing.
I don't remember your second question.
So what do you think the budget needs to be in these Power 4 conferences now to compete with one another, as far as NIL goes?
No, we're in the infancy of all this, right? We're, again, only a little bit over 3 years in, and I've seen a dramatic shift year to year where the barrier is getting higher and higher. And interestingly, through a settlement that has been crafted to put an end to various antitrust lawsuits against the NCAA, lawyers for the players, and I'd argue that they didn't necessarily have all the players' best interests in mind, have come to a cap on what schools will be able to pay players directly. Now, understand, currently, no schools are paying players directly, despite some states very recently changing their laws to allow for it. My understanding is the cap is going to be somewhere around $20 to $21 million fall 2025. Now, this is to be spread across all sports within each program, and it's a cap. There's no floor. But obviously, the big power programs will be spending at or near that cap if this settlement agreement does reach final approval. That said, I don't think by putting in this artificial cap, you're in any way stalling the race between the real haves, the Ohio States, Michigans, Texas, Florida. The big spending programs, they're going to have to still go above and beyond because there's truly no cap. You could still have collectives and boosters that are supplementing the amount that the schools are capped at spending. And maybe that doesn't happen year one, but and it's hard to predict the future. I hate speculating. If I'm put on the spot, my speculation is you're going to see the collectives and boosters still have an important role because that cap is not going to be sufficient in the recruiting at the highest level.
Right. It's not going to apply to them either. So, I mean, it's going to be the school's cap, not the third-party cap. So I think you're exactly right. Darren, what we need to do is kind of like what the NFL is put signing bonus proration in there. So if we can prorate the number, the cap gets even larger and stuff for these guys.
Well, and part of the really interesting issue when it comes to payments from schools to players, and even in the current ecosystem, is one of the prohibitions that's remained that the NCAA allegedly will enforce is that payments can't be contingent on on-field performance. So where, let's say roster bonuses or bonuses for reaching a certain number of yards in a season or a number of touchdowns, that would actually violate the NCAA's rules. And that could be sort of played in two ways. It's a negative for players if the school or the collective's not willing to go beyond that amount. But on the agent or lawyer side, you simply say, hey, our hands are tied on this sort of contingent money. Let's just apply it on the guaranteed portion, right? So,
right.
The bonus type structure still technically isn't permissible, and it doesn't seem like it would change if and when this settlement receives final approval.
Darren, it's fascinating. The space keeps changing almost daily, and I think it's going to continue to go that way. We appreciate you giving us some of the insight and continued success down the road.
Hey, good luck with this podcast. Appreciate
Thanks,
you having
Darren.
me.
There he is. Darren Heitner, Heitner Legal, as Hadley said, is, I think, well-versed a voice on all things NIL as anybody in the space. All right, coming up, there was some good for Netflix and some bad for Netflix, including a lawsuit now over some issues that happened during the Jake Paul-Mike Tyson fight. And how closely was the NFL watching? We'll dig into it next. All right, we continue with Deals and Deadlines. Hadley and Matt back with you. Thanks for being a part of the show. I'll remind you guys, you can subscribe on any podcast platform. We're available on all your biggies, your Apples, your Spotifys. You know them. Subscribe, and this will be waiting for you. It drops each and every Friday, wherever you get your favorite podcast. All right, Hadley, let's talk about the aftermath of Jake Paul and Mike Tyson. Not the fight.
Watch it, by the way.
Yeah, I watched it. I mean, I bet on it. I won money. It was the easiest money I've ever won. So I don't want to talk about that. Wasn't a fight. That was a farce. What I do want to talk about is the spectacle. So the good and bad for Netflix. The good is, and I'm going to take them at their word, that 60 million households were watching, and now the number comes out of
100 million, right?
Well, 108 million globally.
Right.
We're watching 60 million households domestically. Don't know if that's true. They didn't have Nielsen reporting the way they will with the NFL, which we'll talk about in a minute. So that looks like a huge boon for Netflix. The problem is, on the biggest stage, they had massive issues, technologically speaking, buffering issues, people losing the broadcast. So much so now that today there's been there's been a lawsuit filed.
First of all, I'd love to know what the damages are for the lawsuit. I had the same issues. I thought it was my house.
No.
Called my son up. It was his house, so I knew then. I looked at social media and saw that it was going on through everybody.
We have a class action lawsuit that has been filed by a guy named Ronald Denton, who filed the suit in Florida 3 days after he says him and thousands of others struggled to watch the Netflix broadcast with the win that Jake Paul had against Mike Tyson. He claims as soon as he tuned in at 8 o'clock, quote, "We were faced with legendary problems, including no access, streaming glitches, and buffering issues. No word on what the damages that they're seeking are, but if it's class action, they're going to want a ton of people and a big number to make because everybody will end up suing and everybody get $8. But I don't know on what grounds, because I get news for you. You tuned into a streaming service with a lot of people. While it's a bad look for Netflix, I don't think you can win money this way.
Yeah, and I will tell you, I watched the prelim fights, which I thought were fantastic. Really did. I thought there was less buffering issues during the Tyson fight itself. So again, I don't know what the damages are. We'll have to wait to read the lawsuit and see what the damages were. I know we had Andrew Ruff, Mike Tyson's agent, on with us right before the fight, and I spoke to him briefly after the fight, and they felt it was a huge success. Obviously, the fight itself may not have been what they wanted, the result, but I think overall he was right, the numbers as far as people that would be watching it. There was such huge attendance, 70+ thousand people. All these things broke records outside of Las Vegas. And again, MVP Productions, which is Jake Paul's company,
home run,
along with Mike Tyson, they brokered, a deal with Netflix that wasn't just this one-off deal, right? They're doing other things with Netflix. And I think for Netflix, like any media company, when you go big, there are mistakes that happen, and you learn from those mistakes. And so I think those buffering issues that they're concerned about with the NFL, which I know we're going to talk about, is something that they're going to have to address and figure out, what went wrong and how to fix that.
But let's talk about that, because we're a month away.
Correct.
The NFL will have 2 games on Christmas Day. And this was a big deal because just the global amount of people watching the Mike Tyson fight and Jake Paul. The NFL doesn't play around with this stuff. They're going to sit down in a room with everybody at Netflix, from every engineer to everybody who runs their infrastructure, and say, not how do we make this not happen? We can't have this happen on Christmas Day. Right. And then right after that, different scale. But remember, WWE Raw moves to Netflix. And that audience is one that if you don't have their stuff right, you will have a massive social media meltdown from people. And that starts in January on a live basis. So I'm sure those conversations have already happened and will continue to happen leading up, correct?
Most definitely. I mean, listen, they've got to make sure, whether it's the NFL or another sporting event, these were issues, and they've got to correct them. And then let's add to the broadcast is you're going to have Beyonce performing.
Right.
So I think there's going to be even an uptick of viewers during the halftime show. So I think there's going to be a lot of moving parts. I do believe Netflix is the preeminent new media streaming service, and I think they're going to work through these things and correct all these issues moving forward.
Why do you think, and this will lead into our next discussion, the NFL on Christmas Day is going to have Nielsen measuring the ratings, just like they would for a CBS game or a Fox game. And that is to provide the next go-round of games they want to sell to advertisers. For instance, there were just 31 million people that tuned in to watch the Chiefs play against the Bills, which is an enormous number. It's one of the biggest numbers outside of a Thanksgiving or Christmas game the NFL has seen since 2007. Netflix did not do that for the fight. Why?
They don't have to. Again, their business partner isn't the NFL giants. The NFL has to be accountable to their advertisers. So they have to put those metrics in place. So when they're working with Netflix, ESPN, ABC, CBS, whoever it may be, they have to have these metrics in place. This was a fight. There was no governing body. They can do what they want to do.
Do you take them at their word on these numbers, or are they puffed up like most?
I'm sure there's some truth to it, but I'm sure they're exaggerated a little bit because they want to do the next big project. But I think the numbers are real. And I think they weren't as prepared for these numbers because these issues, from buffering to whatever it may be, may not have happened. They may have thought, remember, their projection was 20 million or whatever it was, and Andrew Ruff told us, no, it's going to be north of 60 million. Yeah. And he was right.
Sure.
Maybe they weren't prepared for that. So, but again, the NFL is a different animal. I mean, they are a fine-tuned machine, multi-billion-dollar machine, and I know that they need these metrics moving forward because, again, it's not just selling ads on Netflix, it's selling ads on the other spaces as well. And I know that, if it does well and they don't have these issues, it's only going to bring more money, more opportunities. And we talk about this always. Roger Goodell is one thing he's done well is brought the league more money, brought the owners more money, which in theory has trickled down to the players. Maybe.
Well, and there's the globalization that they wanted, that they've achieved. Okay, let's talk about the other big news in the TV sports world. TNT's Inside the NBA is quality of pregame or postgame show that sports television has seen is now going to be outsourced essentially to ESPN and ABC. And it's one of the more fascinating pivots, I think, in the sports media world, Hadley, that it's still going to be produced by TNT. Warner Brothers Productions is still going to, Warner Brothers Discovery is still going to have all the production costs. They're still going to run it. It's going to come out of Atlanta, but it's now going to be on the Disney family of networks on ESPN and ABC. This begins, I think, to show us what we're going to see moving forward. There used to be this separation all the time of my talent, my guys, stay away. And now we're saying TNT, okay, we're going to produce it. There's got to be, and you would help me with this, there's got to be some revenue in this for TNT beyond just we're producing it, it's not going to air on your network. So help me understand the business model that we're going to see more of it, in this case, how it benefits Turner Broadcasting the same way ESPN.
Well, first of all, it benefits Disney, right? They didn't have to hire new people. They're outsourcing like we all outsource different things. So it was a smart business move. TNT could not lose this. I mean, they felt if they lost this part, and again, a basketball game is a basketball game, but their pre and post game is elite. And they've got elite talent, and they've done an amazing job. And so I think it was a smart move by TNT. I'm not so sure economically it's a win-win for TNT. I think it was more about their image and their brand as they sell other things as well in the sports world. So I think that there's going to be revenue coming from advertising, but at the end of the day, I think this was more about creating their image. They already have this pre-game brand, and it gets to further their brand on another network. And you're exactly right. I remember, growing up even, when you were watching football and it was on Fox, it was even before Fox, it was on,
CBS or NBC, right?
Yes, they wouldn't say the game was on the other network. Now everyone talks about the game is on this network. Everyone's very proud to share the networks because I think they know at the end of the day, the more viewership, regardless of what medium it's on, it benefits the total package. And at the end of the day, that'll benefit their own brand itself.
Okay, one more TV story. So the commissioner of baseball, Rob Manfred, story is that he wants to see some of these local products that have been run by the Diamond Sports Group, who's been going through the reorganization after bankruptcy. He wants to see the folks at Major League Baseball take control of these local TV rights to launch a free blackout-free opportunity for people that's separate of MLB TV, or just ways for more people to view his game. 6 teams are involved, and we know the Braves are one of them.
Correct.
And I'm trying to get a vision of this. Now, the Braves came out very quickly, we saw last week, through a couple of streaming options. Through an Amazon Prime Video, you're going to be able to stream a Braves-only package, which we'll find out more details about, and also through the FanDuel Sports Network. What we don't know is a price and what other content. And I would say for these other teams, I'm fascinated to see if the public is willing to spend a decent amount of money to add more to their streaming expense.
Yeah, first of all, when they talk about free, let's be real, nothing is free, right? You're going to be streaming it from some sort of media outlet, and you're going to have to pay for that. We were just talking about this at our own home, that, you look at your monthly bill of all the streaming services that you have to do to watch what your shows you want to watch, your movies you want to watch, and now all your different sporting events you want to watch. So I think it is amazing. I'd be surprised if MLB takes over because it's something that they don't do and don't need that headache. But if they can't find the right third-party partner that they can work with, that they can rely on, and they want to make sure that people as a whole are protected and they can watch their local team play, then they may offer a service on their streaming device, but it's not going to be free. When they talk about with Rob Manfred, again, these commissioners have done a great job about generating revenue, which again brings to the owners, to the teams, et cetera. And so I think that, you just got to clean it up to make sure everyone has access to it, especially some of these bigger markets that are like the Atlanta Braves. And again, you look at it, if you don't have Amazon Prime, how else are you going to watch it, right? You're going to have to go ahead and purchase Amazon Prime. So I think I think we're still going to figure that out. I don't think there'll be a definitive answer yet.
So I also think you better price this right. What we saw during the carriage dispute.
Do you really need to, though?
I do, because here's why. The carriage dispute taught us a lot, at least locally with the Braves and Xfinity. We all thought within the industry, well, people they'll switch. They'll leave the cable provider and go to some other provider because I need to see my Braves. And what people did is they kind of held firm and were like, okay, we'll see the ESPN game when it pops on or the Fox game. People did not dump the carrier the way we did because, and it's nothing against the Braves. I think people love the Braves. I think, Hadley, at some point, everybody's got a budget. And it's like, I pay for Netflix, and I've got Hulu, and I've got Amazon Prime. If you're going to charge me $20 a month to only get, and I'm going to say only get a baseball game, well, Netflix charges me $20, and I complain I don't have enough content there. So I think the pricing and the other content you're offering the consumer is a big deal.
I don't disagree with you, and I think it'll also depend on the market. Oh. I think it will depend. I don't think it'll be a set price. I think it may depend on big market versus small market because, again, at the end of the day, if you really care about viewership and want these people to watch, I think you're right. You need to price it. But again, there will be a price.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Always is. All right. That is going to do it for this week's edition of Deals and Deadlines. Thank you to you all for watching on the 680 The Fan YouTube channel or listening on any podcast platform. Please subscribe, pass the word, let people know. The show drops every Friday on all podcast platforms, and we appreciate you guys joining us. We'll do it again next week. For Had, I'm Matt. Thanks for joining us on Deals and Deadlines.